You may be seated. You are the sole judges of the credibility, that is the believability of all the witnesses testifying in this case, and of the weight, that is the importance, to be given their testimony. In judging the effect of evidence, you must be fair and impartial and not arbitrary. While you have discretion in judging the effect of evidence, you must exercise that discretion in accordance with these instructions. The evidence presented by one witness whom you believe is sufficient for the proof of any fact in this case. You are not bound to decide any fact based upon the testimony of a larger number of witnesses whose testimony does not convince you against the testimony of a smaller number of witnesses or against presumption or other evidence which does not convince you. In determining what the facts are in this case, it may be necessary for you to determine what weight should be given to the testimony of each witness. To do this, you should carefully consider all the testimony given, the circumstances under which the witness has testified, and every matter in evidence that tends to indicate whether a witness is worthy of belief. You may consider the appearance of the witnesses on the stand, their manner of testifying, their apparent candor, their apparent fairness, their apparent intelligence, their knowledge and means of knowledge on the subject upon which they have testified, whether the witnesses have an interest in the outcome of the case or any motive, bias, or prejudice, to the extent of which the witnesses are supported or contradicted by other evidence, the capacity of the witnesses to receive and communicate information, and proof that the witness has a bad character for truthfulness. If you believe that any witness has willfully testified falsely as to any material matter in the case, you must reject such testimony as you believe to have been false, and you have the right to review the rest of the testimony with distrust and in your discretion disregard it, unless after examination of all the evidence you find such testimony worthy of belief. This rule does not apply if a witness unintentionally commits an error in the witness's testimony or is unintentionally mistaken as to some matters or facts about which the witness testifies, or gives evidence concerning matters not material in this case without the intention of deceiving the court or jury. Prosecution, are you ready? Yes. Defense, are you ready? Yes. Prosecution, you may begin your opening statement.
Your Honor, members of the jury, my name is Annika Kluger, and my associate is Ashlyn Lutz. We will be representing the prosecution in this case. We will be prosecuting the defendant, Michael Smith, for negligent homicide. This case is about a man whose own greed got the best of him. He allowed his anger about an owed debt to take hold of his actions. Members of the jury, this state will call 4 witnesses to this trial. First, we will call James Richburg, who will testify that he is a distraught brother ready to give his twin brother justice, explaining how he witnessed his own brother's murder. Everett, our second witness, will explain how he chased James out of the bar because he was trying to leave and owed a debt to the bar. Everett will continue on to tell you how he tackled James, and his ring caught on his leg while doing so. Everett will say how he lost James after this and returned to the bar to buy everyone a drink. Our third witness will confirm an alibi for Everett's sleep and testify that she had been seeing 2 of James's at the bar. At this time is what she believed, but later came to find out that one was actually James and the other was his twin brother, John. She explained how she was having dinner with one of the Jameses before her husband, Philip, chased him out. But then only a few minutes later, witness Everett chased out another James out of the bar. Amy, the witness, will then go on to tell you how Everett quickly returned to buy everyone a round of drinks, and how she watched her husband come home later that night after the bar. Lastly, we will call on a CSI expert, Erica Berkey, who will testify about the medical and scientific information about John's medical conditions. Members of the jury, the defense may claim that Michael is not the only suspect in this crime, but as our witnesses will testify to you, Michael is the only suspect without an alibi. After you have heard all of the evidence, we would ask that you would find the defendant, Michael Smith, guilty as charged on all accounts.
Your Honor, members of the jury, my name is Amelia Cuppy, and I and my co-counselors are representing Michael Smith in this case. We intend to prove that Michael Smith is not guilty of negligent homicide. In order for the prosecution to convict Michael Smith of negligent homicide, they need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt to you, the jury, that Michael Smith acted negligently, and as a result of these actions, the death of John Richburg ensued. For Michael's actions to be deemed negligent, the prosecution needs to prove that Michael Smith acted with a conscious disregard of the risk. Our evidence will show both to the judge and the members of the jury that Michael Smith is innocent of these charges and did not act negligently. Michael Smith is a family man with a wife and children who would not have jeopardized the future of his family and career over any amount of money. The prosecution will attempt to paint Michael Smith as an angry, vengeful loan shark who had a motive, but failed to mention that there were many people who had the exact same motive. The evidence that the prosecution will bring forth to you today is circumstantial at best. An eyewitness testimony from the brother who stole his now dead brother's identity and the defendant's shirt. This is not enough to convict Michael Smith. On July 29, 1944, Michael, after a busy day, went out for a drink at Sleep's bar. He had a little too much to drink. It can happen to anyone. He had an altercation with John Richburg at the bar, but did not drown him in Baker Lake. In this case today, first you will hear from Carrie Smith, and Carrie will include her own personal experience with Michael Smith. Next, the defense will call Phil Almock to the stand to share his own story of the night of July 29, 1944. In the end, this case will come down to a he said, and you as the jury will need to determine who stands to gain the most from lying. All I ask is that you please keep an open mind about this case until you hear all of the evidence. I also ask that you return a verdict of not guilty for the defendant, Michael Smith. Thank you for your attention.
Prosecution, your first witness.
Prosecution would like to call James Richburg to the stand.
Usually the bailiffs is swear him in, but I forgot to train the bailiff since we have a new bailiff, so. He's sworn in.
Mr. Richburg, where have you resided since the year of 1945 to present day?
I moved to Mississippi in 1945.
And under what name have you lived since you moved there?
I was living under my brother's identity.
Your Honor, I would like to enter into Exhibit Evidence 1. This is a copy of James's medical record after a recent hospital visit after experiencing chest pain. It reads, John is a 74-year-old man in poor health. He was admitted to the ER with chest pain. After an ECG, it was apparent the patient had suffered a myocardial infarction. The patient denied a history of cardiovascular disease. Past records were obtained after the hospital in Lucille indicating that the patient should have had situs inversus totalis and Carter-Jenner syndrome. But patient has neither. Report sent to sheriff for further investigation. These reports clearly show that John had medical issues at birth due to the brothers being mirror twins. James had no prior medical issues, as well as his organs being correctly placed. So when 74-year-old John came into the ER with chest pains and was x-rayed and his organs were found in the correct placement, it was obvious to the attending physician that John was in fact James, a matter that James has now decided to be honest with. And why have you decided to come clean after all of these years?
As you read, I'm 74 with no friends, no family, and poor health, and I have nothing
let's take a step back, Mr. Richford. Where were you in the year of 1943, prior to your brother's death?
I enlisted in the Army using his fingerprints, and I later deserted to marry Carrie Smith.
And you divorced her later that year, correct?
Yes.
After you were divorced, what did you do?
I moved to Baker to start a new life.
And I believe you were friends with Michael. Who was Michael?
He was one of my business partners and ex-best friend.
And can you tell the court about you and Michael's past?
Objection, Your Honor, Collins.
Overruled.
One more time, could you just mention?
After the divorce of me and Carrie Smith, and money that I owed him, he got very angry with me.
And what were you doing the night of your brother's murder?
Amy and I had plans to go out to dinner, and she picked me up in Phil's work pickup. And Bill came in and saw Amy and I having dinner and accused us of cheating.
And after he accused you, what happened?
He chased me out of the bar.
And he chased you to where?
The lake.
Once you were at the lake, did you see anything?
No, I didn't see him, but
You didn't see.
I didn't see Phil.
So, could I have the witness read his statement from that night?
I didn't kill him, Michael did. I saw them go into the lake fighting. But yes, I was there. I knew if I said anything, it would get blamed on me. So I fled. I left. I went back to Mississippi and started a new life with John. There I said it. Charged me with that, but I denied something.
So, to verify, you saw Michael fighting John at the edge of the lake that night.
I did.
And why did you decide to flee instead of helping your brother?
Because I thought if I went and got help, it would get turned around on me.
Okay. Thank you.
Defense your witness.
You guys stay there, James. James, you guys stay there.
Okay, James, so I'm first going to ask you, what exactly do you think you saw that night at the lake?
I saw Michael and John fighting.
Okay? So, what exactly happened between them and the fight?
Well, the fight fell into the lake.
Objection, asked and answered. Sustained.
Please continue.
James, you can raise your question.
Yeah. Okay. What type of fight was happening between you? Was it a physical, or between Michael and John? Was it physical, or
It was physical.
was it verbal?
I didn't
do you remember specifically if anything beyond a fist fight was happening? Can you go into more detail?
On my class, I've been falling. All I saw was fists. I'm falling over like my butt.
So you claim that this fight was the murdering of your brother, correct?
Yes.
So why did you not help your brother?
Objection, asked and answered.
Sustained.
Why did you not help your brother fight off Michael at the lake?
As I said, I figured
Objection, leading question.
as I've said, I figured if I went and helped, they would get turned around and find out.
So then you stated earlier that you fled to Mississippi, correct?
Yes.
Why did you flee to Mississippi?
Certainly.
Objection, asked and answered.
Sustained.
Why did you feel that fleeing to Mississippi and taking your brother's identity was the better option for you?
So,
Objection, asked and answered.
Sustained.
So we're going to go back to the bar. So you stated earlier that you and Amy went to dinner at the bar that night together, correct?
correct.
Did Phil know about this?
I don't know.
So do you admit that you and Amy were there together via a relationship?
No, we were there as friends.
So then, can you take me through one more time what happened at the bar?
Objection, asked and answered.
Sustained.
So, in the end, you're stating that when you went to the lake, you saw Michael and John fighting. Where did you go after that?
To Mississippi. Like right after the
Directly after.
I went home.
So when you say that it looks like you went to great lengths to cover up this action happening by fleeing and taking your own brother's identity,
I wish I could cover up anything.
that's all my questions, Your Honor.
You can redirect if you want to, or you.
Prosecution would like to call the next witness, Everett Sleep, to the stand.
Everett, what was your relationship to James?
I barely knew the guy. He's always in my car.
So, what were your feelings towards James?
I guess you could say I was frustrated towards him. He's always run off with tab, never will pay it off.
So, did you act on these feelings?
Yeah, one time when he started to leave, he moved past tab, so I chased him. Went to tackle the guy and scraped his leg with my ring.
So, in this moment, who did you believe you were chasing?
James.
And you said after you chased him, what happened?
I chased him, tried to tackle him, scraped his leg with my ring, and then I lost him at that parking lot.
Your Honor, I would like to enter into evidence, exhibit number 16. this photograph of a wound found on the dead body, as you can see, the wound matches the approximate size and shape of Everett's ring. The body found in the lake was that of John's, not James. Therefore, Everett had to have chased John out of the bar, not James, whom he thought he was chasing. As you all can see, the ring and the wound on the leg. So, after you lost who you thought was James, what did you do?
Turn back to the bar.
No further questions.
My first question is, Everett, did you know that James had a twin brother?
Why?
So, that night, who did you think you were chasing out of the bar?
James.
Objection asked and answered.
Suspect.
How did you know that you chased James out of the bar? Did you see James and John at the bar that night?
I just assumed it was James.
So, in the middle of your fight with, who we come to find out is John, did you ever ask John if he was James?
I hope you said twins.
Did John ever say to you that he was John and not James?
No.
So, you thought you were chasing after James, and you stated earlier that James owes you money, correct? Were you upset by this?
Objection asked and answered.
Suspect.
Were you upset by this that night, in particular, earlier before the fight? Did you get into a fight with anyone else that night?
No.
Prosecution would like to call our next witness to the stand, Amy Arnold.
Amy, where were you the night of the incident?
I started out at Sleeth's bar and then returned home after dinner.
So, how did you get to the bar?
I drove Phil's work truck.
So, were you at the bar alone?
No, I picked up James on my way.
So, who all did you see at the bar?
The bar was packed. I thought I kept seeing two of James, but then I saw Phil first chase out James, and then later Everett must have chased out his twin brother John that was in town that I did not know about.
So, at the time, you believed you were having dinner with James, correct?
Yes.
And then you thought you saw James return because you saw Everett chase out James, correct?
Yes.
So, what did you do after you were at the bar?
I went home.
And when you got home, was Phil there?
No, he came home later drunk.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Amy, my first question is, what was your relationship with James Richburg?
We were friends.
Was there anything more than that?
No.
Are you aware that your husband, at the time, Phil, thought you were in a relationship with James?
Yes, when he came to the bar, he accused us of cheating and then chased James out.
But you do not admit to a relationship?
Objection asked and answered.
Did you know that James had a twin brother?
I did, but I did not know he was in town.
Okay. And you drove your husband's work pickup there?
Objection asked and answered.
So are you 100% sure that James is the person that Phil chased out of the bar that night?
I thought so.
Is it possible that Phil could have chased John out of the bar?
He could have, but I couldn't tell them apart because I did not know that John was in town.
Who would like to redirect? Though you and James were not in a relationship, just friends, you were having dinner with him, correct?
Yes.
So there's no way John could have been the one you were having dinner with.
Yep.
So Phil chased out James.
Yes.
That's all. Thank you.
So the prosecution would like to call our last witness to the stand, the CSI expert, Erica Berkey.
Your Honor, I would like to start by calling into evidence Exhibit 2. Exhibit 2 is the medical records of James and John Richford at their time of birth. It says John R. Richford and James R. Richford are twin boys. They were born on August 20th, 1918 at 11:18 a.m. Their physical examination showed the twins were mirror twins, which Ms. Berkey will clarify in a minute. Baby John was diagnosed with situs inversus totalis. Further examination indicated trouble breathing, and he was diagnosed with cardigan syndrome. As read from the medical records of Exhibits 1 and 2, John was diagnosed with situs inversus totalis after birth. What does this condition entail?
It means that John's organs would be mirrored or on the opposite side of his body.
And according to Exhibit 2, John was also diagnosed with cardigan syndrome. How does one get this disease?
It's a side effect from situs inversus totalis, which causes mucus buildup in the lungs.
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
Is there a common treatment for cardigan syndrome?
Yes, a drug called acetylcysteine, which thins and loosens the mucus in the airways.
And how is acetylcysteine administered?
It is a powder form taken orally with water.
Your Honor, I would like to enter into Exhibit Evidence 14. This pill bottle was found in the jacket pocket of the dead body, containing a powder that was found to be acetylcysteine. As you can see, pill bottle with remnants of powder. Your Honor, I'd now like to enter into Exhibit Evidence 31. This piece of evidence is a jacket belonging to Michael Smith, the defendant, that was found at the lake the morning after the murder with an unknown white powder found on the jacket. Ms. Berkey, could you tell us your findings concerning this piece of evidence?
We found that the powder found on the jacket and on the dead body was the same. It was acetylcysteine. We found this by the melting point, which was 210 degrees.
So just to clarify, the powder found in the bottom of the pill bottle on the dead body and the powder found on Michael Smith's jacket was the same.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Suspect.
That's all. Thank you.
The defense will be asking this witness no questions.
Prosecution, do you have any more witnesses?
No more witnesses, Your Honor.
Defense, do you have any more witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense would like to call first Carrie Smith. Can you please state your name and occupation for the court?
Carrie Smith, and I'm a retired hotel staff.
How do you know the defendant, Michael Smith?
He's my brother.
So, what would you say Michael was like during his childhood?
He was always super caring. If I had troubles with anything, he was always there to help.
And how do you know the witness, James Richburg?
I don't really have a big relationship.
So, are you saying that James Richburg wasn't your ex-husband?
Oh, yes, sorry.
So, why did you and James Richburg divorce?
He had gambling issues, so then the debt and money issues just got to be too much.
And did you know that he was still alive?
No, I have no idea.
And what is your knowledge of Michael and James Richburg's business?
I knew that they had some issues with owing money.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Your Honor, we would like to bring to exhibit evidence number 12. This is a letter from Michael to his sister, Carrie. In this letter, Michael explains how James has stiffed him out of money and how he is fed up with his crap. The letter reads as follows. Dear Carrie, I am writing to you a letter to let you know that I am heading back to Baker to get my money back from James. I'm so done with this crap. I just want it back. I have a kid on the way. I'm desperate. I'd like to stop by and visit you when I'm in town. This is the letter. So, Carrie, did Michael seem hostile in his letter?
I wouldn't say he was hostile. He was definitely frustrated.
So, would you say done with his crap and I am desperate are malicious statements? I will say the question again. Wouldn't you say done with his crap and I am desperate are malicious statements?
Objection, Your Honor, badgering.
Overruled.
I wouldn't say it's really hostile. I've seen him act.
Not hostile, but malicious.
No.
Okay. And so if he is not malicious or hostile, why does Michael say he was desperate?
He just wants to get paid back. He has a child in the way. He wouldn't do anything to hurt that.
But he needs the money back for his child.
But I don't think he could go to extreme.
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative.
Sustained.
The defense would like to redirect. Carrie, if I can have you read your witness statement for me, here.
Michael's my brother. We've been close all our lives, and he's always been a nice guy. At the time, he was expecting a child, so why would he jeopardize his family by murdering his old friend in such a public place?
No further questions, Your Honor.
That's your next witness.
The defense would like to call Phil Mock to the stand. Can you please state your name and occupation for the court?
My name is Phil Amick, and I am a farm owner.
Where were you on the night of July 27th, 1944?
I I was at Sleeves Bar.
And how do you know the witness James Richburg?
He had an affair with my wife, and I chased him out of the bar.
So you would say that your ex-wife and James Richburg were having an affair?
Yes.
And how do you know that they were having an affair?
Who was in her with
Did you get into an altercation with James that night?
Yes.
And would you say that were you chasing him? Did you punch him?
I chased him out to the front of the lake, we exchanged a few punches, and then I went back to the bar.
And where was Michael at the point when you were on the lake?
I didn't see Michael anymore.
And so when you went back to the bar, where was Michael?
Michael was still at the bar having a picnic.
No further questions, Your Honor?
So the defense said that all of this happened on July 27th, but I have that this occurred on July 29th, 1944. So on that night, July 29th, 1944, did you see Amy and James having dinner?
27th, I did.
And so what was your reaction to this?
I was a little upset, so I chased him to the front of the lake, exchanged a punch, and very good.
So this was on the July 27th and not the 29th, in which the murder took place? No further questions.
The defense would like to redirect. Come up and say, I did say it wrong, but I have the 29th. And I would like, Phil, can you please read your statement from here?
I was at the bar. I caught Amy and James at the bar. I chased after James. He's a cheater, a liar. He worked for me for a week. I found out he was cheating with Amy, and then he was dead. Found his money clip in the door of the work pickup that Amy said she brought. But I don't know why it was there. Why would I kill him? I was going to fire him anyway. Then he'd be out of town for good.
No further questions, Your Honor. The defense would like to call its last witness, Michael Smith. Can you please state your name and occupation for the court?
I'm Michael Smith. I'm a retired construction worker.
And how do you know the witness, James Rickford?
He was a business partner and my ex-best friend.
Where were you on the night of July 29th, 1944?
I was at Sleeves Bar.
What would you say the scene was like in the bar that night?
I would say it was pretty hostile. Lots of people were getting in fights.
What would you say the scene was like in terms of people?
Objection, leading question?
Almost everyone was drunk.
And did you know that James's twin brother was in town that night?
No.
So do you remember talking to John, who at the time you thought was James?
Yes.
And what did you talk about?
We talked about the money that he owed me.
So what happened after you had this talk?
We exchanged a few punches and it was quickly broken up and I returned back to the bar.
And you were in the bar when this happened, correct?
Yes.
So after you got into this fight, what did you do?
I returned to my seat and continued drinking.
But so how did you end up at the lake?
After I was done drinking at the bar, I walked home and I tripped and fell and passed out there.
And why did you walk home from the bar that night?
I do not have enough funds to get a cab.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I would like to call Evidence Exhibit 19. Michael, could I get you to read your own statement for me, please?
I was at Sleeves Bar that night. We were all drunk together and we got into a fight. But I didn't drown. I was trying to get my money back, and then I passed out and I don't remember what happened. I woke up at the lake and left.
So, you claim to not remember that night,
I do not remember at the lake and after that.
but before that?
Before the lake, at the bar, yes.
And was it... Did you see Everett chase John out of the bar?
Yes.
And did you pursue John, who you thought was James at the time, after Everett chased him out?
Yes.
And you don't remember getting to the lake, but we have an eyewitness account of you attacking John at the lake. You don't remember that?
I do not.
Okay, you don't remember the moment you attacked someone?
I was heavily drunk. I do not remember.
And you don't remember John being doubled down over the edge of the lake?
Objection, bathroom.
Sustained.
No further questions, Your Honor?
So, defense will like redirect.
So, Michael, from your previous statement to me, you fought with James Richburg or John, you thought was James, at the bar.
Yes.
But you did not fight with him at the lake.
No.
No further questions, Your Honor?
Defense, do you have any more witnesses?
No.
Prosecution, you can begin the closing statement.
Your Honor and members of the jury, this trial is not held to prove the ultimate innocence of 3 suspects. None of our witnesses called today to testify are truly innocent. Some may have been accused of adultery, others battery, and others theft of personal belongings and identity. But there's only one suspect that is guilty of negligent murder. And today, I believe we have proved to you who that suspect is. To be found guilty of negligent murder, we must have proved to you that 1, the defendant caused the death of John Richburg, and 2, the defendant acted negligently. Negligence is defined as an action done with a conscious disregard of risk, or when the person should be aware of the risk that an action may cause. On the night of July 29, 1944, the defendant, Michael Smith, made a conscious decision to become intoxicated while in the company of a man that enraged him. That decision led to a fight that cost a young, innocent man his life. The defendant was well aware of his feelings towards James Richburg, as we proved to you in the letter that he wrote to his own sister. The defendant was well aware that he was at Sleeth's bar drinking with James Richburg at the time, all of which he admitted to in his own statement. The night of July 29, 1944, Michael Smith made not 1, not 2, but 3 conscious decisions that disregarded associated risks. He made claim to not remember the rest of that night, but that claim is simply irrelevant, as the damage had already been done and the defendant had already committed the murder of an innocent man.
Defense, you can begin the closing statement.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I would like to remind you of the evidence in these statements presented today. All witnesses here today testified in agreement about the numerous bar fights, either involving each witness here or seen directly by the witnesses. This clearly shows that there were multiple people at the bar that night that were not only intoxicated, but also fighting. Our client has explained his altercation in the bar with John. Michael was not aware that James's twin brother John was in town. In fact, James never told his best friend of years, Michael, that James had a twin brother in the first place. Michael was only seen in the bar. Other witnesses, however, were seen leaving and returning to the bar after getting into altercations with the victim and others outside. Michael is a loving husband who at the time had a child on the way. This man would never commit this crime that would then jeopardize his entire life. Michael is one of many people whom James Richburg owed money, some including the witnesses you have heard from today. Members of the jury, this case comes down to he said, he said. There must be evidence that proves beyond a reasonable doubt that our client is guilty. The evidence presented by the prosecution is purely circumstantial at best. So I ask you the question, who had more to gain from the death of John Richburg? The man who had a wife and a baby on the way? I think not. The evidence presented does not reach the standard to convict my client of negligent homicide, and I ask you to find him not guilty.
Jury, there are two kinds of evidence, direct and circumstantial.
Yeah, we got Prosecution would like to remind the jury that the defense's argument is based off of a man who does not remember the night. He claims to have taken a cab in 1944 in Baker, Montana. He claims to be a family man who used the terms, "so done with this crap," and "I'm desperate." And we would like to also remind the jury that none of the other witnesses called to the stand today saw Michael at Sleeth's bar. Thank you.
Jury, there are two kinds of evidence, direct and circumstantial. Direct evidence is when a witness testifies directly of his or her knowledge on the main facts or facts to be proven. Circumstantial evidence is proof from the jury which may infer other connected facts which follow according to common experience. Both direct evidence and circumstantial evidence are acceptable as means of proof, and neither is entitled to a greater weight than the other. To convict the defendant of negligent homicide, the state must prove the following evidence. 1, that the defendant caused the death of John Richburg, a human being, and 2, that the defendant acted negligently. If you find from your consideration of all the evidence that all these evidence have been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, then you should find the defendant guilty. If, on the other hand, you find from your consideration of the evidence that any of these elements have not been proved beyond a reasonable doubt, then you should find the defendant not guilty. A person acts negligently when an act is done with a conscious disregard of the risk, or when the person should be aware of the risk. The risk must be of a nature and degree that to disregard it involves a gross deviation from the standard of conduct that a reasonable person would observe in the active situation. Gross deviation means a deviation that is considerably greater than the last ordinary care.
Instructions and we'll move the camera. Yep. Need those direct and circumstantial. Here's to convict the defendant of negligent homicide, and then do you guys want the evidence that was presented?
Yes.
Okay, so with that.
You can be our foreman.
Walker, get out of here.
Okay.
Who was Everett?
Everybody
Bar.
That was Johnny.
And he claimed to not know James, correct?
No, claimed to not know John. He didn't know John.
But John is the one.
That is dead.
Yes, and the one with the mark on it. But he chased James and tackled him.
No, he chased John.
He thought
it was
James. So my notes are not very good.
Okay, now I'm gonna go to the movie part, so we can take a vote first, or we can discuss first.
I don't care.
Let's do a vote.
Do you wanna vote first?
Oh, but I don't know
Okay.
what my vote is.
Okay, we'll go in order this way.
Okay.
Not guilty? Guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Guilty.
Not guilty. So,
How many was
four?
Who said guilty? Four?
Raise your hand. for
Two,
guilty.
three.
1, 2,
So, 9-3 in favor of not guilty.
Goose. Okay. Anyways, so do we want to go around and say like why we feel this way?
So, the powder that was found on the body and on Michael's coat matched with the melting point based off of the CSI agent that was here.
Okay.
I just don't think there's enough evidence to prove that Michael did it, because the only witness who saw them fighting at the lake was his brother, who was too far away to even hear what was going on. It was nighttime, so I'm not sure he really could tell who he was seeing.
I agree. There wasn't enough evidence.
The only person, like, you're saying that claims to have seen them fighting and to have seen them in the lake was James. The rest of the witnesses claim that the person who attacked James was at the bar still during that time. I just don't think there's enough evidence for it.
Marcus? I'm still thinking.
Okay.
I'll go. So, to me, the powder being in the container in a pocket and still getting on the jacket didn't really make sense how that could have happened. So, that was pretty much the only evidence that really seemed to go against him. It was going to prove that he wasn't guilty. So.
Well, given there's powder, they still had altercation earlier in the night that could have caused it to get on him, because he claimed to have fought him. So I'd say that after he doesn't remember, there is not enough evidence to find out who was at the lake at what time.
I'll pass.
Me too. Alex, you go.
Okay, so, like Jackson said, they got in a fight earlier in the night. One, James is the only person who saw him, and everyone else claimed that he was at the bar. And they were all drinking, so James could be misplacing who was there and who wasn't. And he said he didn't hear anything, so he's obviously too far away. Yeah.
Hearing everybody's, I kind of want to change my vote, but I think that he's guilty only because, like, it just doesn't, like, how the defendant presented to us, how, like, he, in his statement, he said that he had went to the lake only because he wanted to get the money, but then all of a sudden, everybody's saying that he was at the bar. I don't know, it's just all not making sense.
Do you want Michael's statement?
Yes.
Okay.
I say not guilty because, like Alex said, everyone was drunk and there was like a lot of he said, I guess, and there was just like not enough evidence to say that Michael was the one in trouble.
Yeah, basically not enough evidence.
Okay, so I said he's not guilty because I don't think he's the one that did it. I think it was actually James, because he hid in under his brother's name, and everyone thought that James was actually dead, although John is the dead one. And I was going somewhere with this, but
Yes, it's just Michael's.
I think if you flee and take your brother's identification and use his fingerprints,
and so James is actually the one with the debt. So if James is dead, he doesn't have to pay off his debt anymore.
Yeah.
And he is now technically John. So James's debt is gone.
He doesn't owe
Yes,
anyone
and he
debt.
was the only one that claimed that he saw Michael attack
Yes.
James.
In the dark.
But
Yeah.
the powder substance doesn't make sense then. Like, yes, they had altercation, like, they fought earlier, but then, what,
I just don't understand the point of the, what was the point of
I
that
also don't
anyway?
know, we don't know Michael's medical history. What if he
Right.
takes something that uses that same powder?
And also, technically, you don't know if it's actually the same thing. They're just two chemicals
Right.
that have the same melting point.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, like, it could have, like, the way I kind of thought of it was when she said that to me, it seemed like it almost had been placed there.
Can someone explain
Because
the point
I
of that
found
to
the
me?
jacket there.
The point of it, I think it was just to be like Michael and him. That's like the only the evidence linking Michael and John together.
Right, yeah.
But
Which-
also the prosecution, they messed up in their statement, their closing statement. They said he took a cab, but.
But also,
He
if
didn't.
Michael said he was at the bar,
Yeah.
and he thought he was with James,
Mhm.
yeah. And if James was actually chased out earlier by Everett,
yeah.
then he was actually with John, who has the same substance, so they were actually together at the bar before he was at the lake.
Yeah.
So it doesn't technically mean that he murdered him at the lake.
Exactly.
You want to do another vote around, or?
Are you calling for another vote?
Sure.
Okay, we'll go around again. This time we'll just raise our hands.
Okay.
All in favor of guilty? Okay, all in favor of not guilty? We've come to a verdict.
Alright, just gonna go get the bailiff. Why don't we let that?
Maybe seated.
All right.
Ms. Barnum, have you reached a verdict?
Yes, Your Honor, we find the defendant not guilty.
Yeah. Did they want to know like the reasoning before I do that? Okay.
With the drug listed, there was enough evidence, like, the only thing that we found that really connected them was the powder, so we didn't know anything about Michael's medical history, he needed it, and it was just based on their burning point, not their African.
Also, James had the motive to kill John because James was the one in debt. And if James died and he took his brother's identity, then there would be no debt for James anymore.
Read the papers.
Yeah, let's
Come
Yeah, let's read it. Okay, everybody sit down.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, James Richburg, alias James Love, had a rocky past that he was desperate to leave behind. He had enlisted in the Army in 1941 but deserted after only 2 weeks. Fortunately, he had convinced his mere twin brother John to impersonate him when he was fingerprinted when he joined, in case he wanted to back out so the desertion wouldn't be traced back to him. He had also committed petty crimes and owed a lot of people money. After deserting, he married Carrie Smith but divorced 2 years later. After a failed business venture with Michael Smith, Carrie's brother, James left the southeast U.S. and traveled across the country looking for work. He had only been a baker for 2 weeks working for Phil Amick and had already developed a bad reputation. He allegedly had an affair with Amy, Phil's wife, had not paid any of his bills, and even owed his boss money. He invited his estranged twin brother John to visit Baker to reconcile. Michael Smith heard about James's new job and followed him to Baker to try to recuperate his losses. After a rowdy night at Sleeth's bar, owner Everett Sleeth, estranged friend Michael Smith, and James' boss Phil ended up outside in a back alley brawl with James. Everett wanting money for James's tab, Michael for the business venture, and Phil redressing his wife's unfaithfulness. Witnesses such as Phil's wife Amy reported seeing 2 Jameses, but didn't realize John was in town or that James even had a twin. After the brawl, with who ended up being John, not James, Phil and Everett returned to the bar as per witness accounts. James revived the drunk and battered John, and they walked the streets of Baker. Witnesses reported hearing an argument in the alley about being able to swim, but reported they only heard one voice. It was actually both twins engaging in the argument. Either fate or malicious forethought found them down by the lake. Michael was without an alibi following the fight, though James's account placed him at the lake where he awoke the next morning. There, Michael's shirt was also found covered with John's medication, indicating they engaged in an altercation at the lake. However, when the opportunity arose, James took the chance to start a new life and murdered his twin brother John, or said simultaneously faking his own death. The next morning, James fled to Mississippi under the guise of his twin brother John. He then sent a wire to Fallon County reporting that it was his brother who died. He was able to start over and lived almost 50 years as an imposter before suffering a heart attack when the doctors discovered he was not John.
Do you all want to know, like, like, a lot of this was actually true, it actually happened, and some of it was fake? Do you know which parts were real and which parts were fake?
The twin was fake, right?
The twin was fake.
The only thing was real was the drowning.
The drowning, the Phil Ahmed, I think that owing money was in the newspaper?
I don't remember.
Some sketchy stuff. He had a lot of abrasions on his skin.
Yeah.
And the clothing, there was clothing found there. And then the brother from Mississippi did wire the sheriff here and say, that's my brother.
He really did?
Yeah, and Edgar Allan Hoover was like the head of the FBI, and he sent a wire and let them know he actually deserted. So he let them know, I think it was Hoover.
Yep.
Or yeah, it let him know that he had deserted. He actually deserted after 2 weeks. And his gravestone is in Bonnievale.
Really?
See, yeah, and it's spelled wrong. It's actually spelled wrong. And I think where's Cheyenne? We worked that into the story a little bit, but I didn't write about that. Michael was the one that changed the name on the paperwork.
On the court side, this is something that would happen. You prosecuted somebody who thought the evidence fit. The medicine on the shirt was the most direct evidence that you, especially because the shirt was at the lake. But it's hard to prove. I always feel like, and you guys can be to attest to this, it's always hard for the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. It seems like it's easy for the defense to sow seeds of reasonable doubt. So every year it usually seems like defense has an easier go than the prosecution because these cases are made to be so confusing with so much circumstantial evidence. But my mom's been here for most of these now. This was the most thought out 2 sides we've ever had. Like, we've never had this kind of evidence entered in. Like, they had a whole string of evidence. You could have brought up
The fingerprints?
well, the fingerprint, but the wire, the article back, that would have had to come from James after,
Right.
you know what I mean, after his brother. So that could have been like kind of almost a nail in the coffin. But but the fact is that you guys had a very well thought out argument. And then the jury, I'm very impressed with the things you guys picked up on. Because just listening, I don't know, you guys maybe can say this, but it's kind of hard to follow everything that happened, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay, even in a line of questioning. And I will say this, the one time that I was on a jury, it was hard to follow. Even with all the questions, you're like, I have no idea. And so you have to take notes. If you're ever on a jury, you have to take notes. There were so many witnesses.
It's probably more complex in real life.
This is, I don't know, this one's pretty complex with so many possible suspects. It was like, we blame Sage. She's not even here yet. But yeah, you guys did a good job of picking up on things. In fact, Cheyenne said at the end that it seems like the bottle of powder being in a closed bottle and then spilled doesn't make sense because it almost seems like it was placed there.
Yeah, and
See,
we had a
story.
story, but their story ruined our story.
Because we both made up our own stories about Michael.
Right, and you could have
no one
presented your own story, you know, then it would be
Because no one saw Michael.
No,
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Not a single statement saw Michael, so
Right,
it was
and that was kind of the point they were trying to make.
Right.
Nobody saw him leave the bar. Nobody had, except for James. The only eyewitness is the guy who has the most questionable motive.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
That's
that,
so concerning though, because like in real life when that happens, like the jury could have just as easily said Michael's guilty. You know what I mean?
And then proven it is.
yeah. it is scary to put your hands in the life of 12 average people. So don't do things to put your hands in the life of 12 average people.
Michael didn't do anything, so like, what if someone thought I murdered someone? And then the jury's like, yeah, she did, it was her.
Happens probably more than
Yeah.
No, and this is all meant to be, this is mostly meant to be fun. I mean, it's fun, I think it's fun for you to come up with stuff. It's stressful, yes, but it's all, everybody gets a glowing review all around. I think that watching 12 Angry Men, did that help you guys?
Yes, that's what we got from.
Yes. They totally went into it, went around just like they thought.
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, that was one of it. We're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting good, yeah.
Or we're
Yeah.
just
Oh, you're just that great. You guys are just that great.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom or Kelly said you guys dress better than actual lawyers.
Yeah.
Do not wear black.
That's for
She's
you,
wearing black.
the defendant, doesn't mean that
She didn't want you to look gloomy.
I don't want you to look
I suggested a Hawaiian shirt because she said that's the
Your mom. Is she ready?
Yeah, she's ready. Yeah.
You want to explain that?
Yeah, okay, so we have so most of this, the idea and some of the research came from the museum, so they partner with us and help us find the information that I don't know how to find. So they have a very special party for you all at the museum that they want you to enjoy until 2:15 when school gets out. So they've got treats and decorations and all these fun things. So we can walk over there and enjoy yourselves for the rest of school. And celebrate.
Wait, how do you turn this off?
You're mad about it.
Don't forget to turn it off.
Yeah, that's true.